All right, well, welcome back to this edition of, or our first edition of Read the Label. I'm host Jason Derkevics along with host Amber Lynn Vitale, and it's a pleasure to actually have you back here. After we did our first pilot show, I was blown away with how much I learned even within that short little segment, and to me it became clear that this podcast is definitely necessary. And along my road trip home, I was thinking about, well, what could be a name of the show, and the concept of basically how important it is to understand, read the label is just really what I think this all boils down to. My mentor, Dr. Eric Llewellyn, he has a saying that it's sort of been like a life mantra for me: is we are what we eat, we are what we drink, we are what we breathe, and we are what we think. However, it's most importantly to first put forth it is, and we are what we think, so we make the appropriate decisions about what we eat, what we drink, and what we breathe. So with that being said, let me just first start off by saying, or asking you, the term read the label, what does that mean for you, and why is it so important in today's supplement industry, food industry?
It's the hardest thing for people to do, to take the time to really educate themselves. And I mean, I've even picked up something that the marketing overrides your brain, your cerebral capacity, your critical thinking capacity, right? The marketing is the first thing you see. It's designed that way. Your psychology is completely known to every good marketing and branding company. So your Instagram feed, your Facebook feed, your TikTok feed already understands, based on what you've chosen, what is going to be attractive to you. That's why I have all these hemp and organic cotton sheets in my feed. You know, I'm always going to stop on that and be like, oh, that looks great. So it just keeps coming back to the feed. So it knows you, it's going to put in front of you. So you are in front of a really skilled magician whenever you are consuming marketing material. So it overrides your, even if you know to read the label, it overrides that. And so then it's taking the time, looking at it, using the face rectangle to actually search something that you don't know, an ingredient you don't know the meaning of, you know, have your tools to, you know, your environmental working group to look up toxic compounds in your skincare, you know, have something where you can look these things up, and then just educate yourself on how a label works. And we have to keep updating it, right? Because there's always changes from the FDA that are recommended by the Council for Responsible Nutrition and are lobbied by the brands themselves and their advertising support to be able to get stuff across the line. Let us just say this, you know. And when labeling should be a hard line law about transparency, it becomes blurred marketing. So our job is to really teach people what to look for.
I totally agree. And that's the biggest stumbling block for most people when you say, oh, you got to read the labels. Well, we can all read, but what are we actually coming across when we look at a label? For example, you know, I'm holding up my supplement company's bottle, Grown by Nature, and with our labels, we're very clear about what it is we're putting in there. For example, with our beta carotene, it's coming from a carrot concentrate. Our folate is coming from an alfalfa concentrate, things that you can recognize. Most people, when they're picking up 99% of the other brands on the market, and that's no over exaggeration, I'm probably under exaggerating, 99% of the brands on the market, you're going to see things on those labels that you don't understand, but we just have that sort of blind trust as a, well, my doctor told me to go get some magnesium. So you go to the store, and which one is the best one? And the person on the aisle or at that time is going to try to gear you towards what's either on sale or what they were told that they need to push, or maybe they are trying to help you out in the best ethical way. And well, this is the one I take. Well, what exactly are they taking? Like, so when people are told to read the labels, I think that's where you and I are trying to really make this transparency, label transparency out there, so people can start understanding what it is that they are coming across and what they should actually be looking for. I'm very biased in this whole operation here, and because I am I have been running with these renatured nutrients for about 20 years now. And I didn't know the difference. I first was taking synthetic supplements because, oh, this was probably the healthiest thing I was doing. I knew my diet maybe that day had some fast food items or something like that, but I had rest assurance that that night I was going to take my supplements and at least I was getting my body's fill of what it needed or what I thought I needed. I shared last time on our pilot that I actually suffered a really bad bladder infection throughout college. I was sidelined as a college athlete. I played baseball, so I was actually had to sit out for a couple of weeks. I could barely even walk. I could barely even move. When I was sitting in class for studies, I had to shift such a certain way that if I sat to one side too much, it was very discomforting. So I have a personal stake in the game for my health. And as a father, I have the stake in what I choose and put before my kids. I always try to give out proper recommendations when asked. I don't try to ram my supplement company down my friends' throats, but they're all aware. They see what's out there, but I don't really truly believe that they grasp what the difference is. So that's why I believe this show, as self-serving as it might seem for my company and for getting the truth out there, there's a reason why I'm sharing
Well,
this
there's a
truth.
reason you started the company. And that's
Exactly.
because of your passion. That's because of what you learned. That's why you started the company. You didn't start a company and back engineer your way into a belief system around why your stuff should sell. The good people start a company because of what they believe in and because they want to share that. And then they look around and they say, this isn't available for me. This isn't available for my family. So I guess I'm going to have to, buckle down and do it myself and make it available. Right.
Right,
And that's
exactly.
not easy. And then you got to keep educating so that people know why it's important. And just going back to your having this bladder, and you said infection. So what that says to me, and going back to Andy Solei's work, renaturing chemical vitamin and mineral compounds into a living matrix again that the body recognizes. In his work, as I understood it, and I like to paint big stories in my head, like I like to visualize them, but he's growing yeast and they're budding and they're bubbling and they're alive. And then he added something like just chemical industrial selenium and it just died. And so, yeah, it's about ratios, it's about dosages. But if these compounds are poisonous in their isolated naked form, what do you think they're doing to your microbiome? And your bladder has one too. So you have all these water solubles. If it's water soluble, it's going to wind up in your bloodstream. It's going to wind up going through your kidneys. Then it's going to sit in your bladder. And there it's altering your microbiome and making you susceptible now through the entire urinary tract to infectious organisms taking over. And not getting into your immune cell where it's supposed to have access if it were from food, and therefore not helping your immune system defend yourself against pathogens that, by the way, folks, they're always there. There are always pathogens lurking in and on every part of you, in your eyes, in your nose, in your mouth, just waiting for your immune defenses to stop looking so they can sneak in, right? So you can take zinc all you want. If it doesn't get in your immune cell, it's not going to help you, right? You can take vitamin C all you want. If it's not in your tissue and in your cells, it's not going to help you. So just that story shows, you're the canary in the coal mine. It doesn't happen to everybody, and by and large, people who get proper nutrients are healthier. And, there's better outcomes for Alzheimer's and other dementia. There's better outcomes for heart disease by and large. But they are chemical compounds if they aren't in a living matrix. And so this is first and foremost why you created what you did. And then how do you keep labeling it? Why are you still using what you always use, Jason? Why do you keep using that?
Well, because it's the simplest form that it possibly is. It's an organic whole food. Just the same principle of which I stand on of not adding in synthetics. Why would we want to change God's natural packaging? And that's what this company sort of stands for, with the Grow Company, in the way that they first introduced these nutrients. Now, you used the term renatured. I just want to take a quick little moment to just sort of like point out what that term renatured means, because they came up with the term, the Grow Company. It's their registered trademark, the manufacturer here in the United States since 1977. And the term renatured is to go against what the synthetic counterparts in the market could be considered as denatured. So they started off with a plant or a paprika with Albert Szent-Györgyi discovering ascorbic acid, and then they broke it down and they stripped it away and chemically altered these forms of food to then have molecules that represent what these vitamins may have. But the problem is there was no life force in them. There was no vitality within those nutrients anymore. They were dead nutrients. So the way food is alive, food is living. When we have an apple, that's a living form of energy within that food. When you eat salads, you feel a lot differently than when you have a whole plate of fried foods that are just sort of like heavy on your stomach. We feel light, we feel fresh. That's because there's a form of living water inside those plant cells as well. So Andy Soleil, the founder of the Grow Company, saw that they were taking food and denaturing it, stripping it away, and he wanted to give back to nature what man and his wisdom had taken away. So therefore, I want to improve this, because our food, as we pointed out in our pilot, you can't have enough organic foods these days to get that which we need within our diet. The food is just heavily depleted. British research, Anne-Marie Mayer posted her findings on a sample analysis between the 1940s and the 1990s. Now, this was done 20 some odd years ago, and the findings back then were alarming. They were showing that selenium, for example, was almost 90% deplete in our foods. Iron was down, magnesium, all across the board. Everything, because as we were explaining in the pilot program last time, is that they started doing these fertilizers, the NPK, and they were focusing on bigger yields of fruits and vegetables. Well, yes, the water content expanded, but the nutrient content and concentration has definitely dwindled. So we can't even eat foods these days that can supply all the nutrients we need. So Andy, knowing this, he wanted to give back to the country that founded him as he escaped the Hungarian Revolution. And he came to this United States, seeing that we were all the most civilized country upon this earth, but they were digesting chemicals and rocks. That was exactly his words to me, that it was amazing to see a man that was on this front line, and the way that he came to this conclusion and why he so desperately made it his life mission to provide these nutrients. So it's just been an amazing trip. And when I come across the history and the foundation of Albert Szent-Györgyi, and Andy Soleil was actually his one of his prized students, it's like you see how this whole dark side crept in, the way the pharmaceutical industry took over that first ingredient, and now it's pushed to the market, and people are under the impression that their vitamin C chemical added to their fruit juices or whatever is going to give them an added boost of vitamin C. That ascorbic acid that's put into those fruit juices is used merely as a preservative. So when I see that,
but they'll count it. They just still count it as milligrams of vitamin C.
Of course, now you get 100% of your vitamin C. This actually brings me up a very important. This is one of the first things that I came across when I started researching what whole food nutrients were. And one of the examples that was brought up was General Mills. They make Wheaties, and they also make Total cereal. Do you remember those old Total cereal commercials? How many bowls would you need to eat to get all the calcium in one bowl of Total? And they'd stack them up and, dishes up to the ceiling type of a thing. So General Mills makes Wheaties and Total cereal. If you look at Wheaties, they're going to show like 20% riboflavin, this percent of that, 5%, 3% iron, whatever it is. Don't quote me on those numbers for their labels. But Total cereal then came out with 100% across the board. Wow. What is different? Do they have magical wheat that they were growing? What exactly is their secret? Well, the secret is that they were spraying a synthetic chemical spray on top of the Wheaties and now calling it Total. and they can market. I heard it quoted as maybe cost them 35 cents per spray application, but now they're charging $2 or so more a box. So there's a little bit of the deception in that market right there.
So synthetic, let's define synthetic, because I think it's, you know, it can mean many things, right? You can actually initially get ascorbic acid from paprika, right? And so you have an identification of a molecule, but then you synthesize it from sugar, let's just say, or corn syrup or beet sugar, or, you know, and that process, I remember the Beijing Olympics, because of the pollution, they shut a lot of factories down. I don't know if you remember this. I forget when it was, 2006 or something like that. And they shut down the vitamin C making factories because they were so polluting with this carboxylation of sugar. So they had to shut them down so that there wasn't as much smog during the Olympics. Then there was this shortage of that ascorbic acid for a period of time because it was so polluting. And so this is a synthesis. You know, I can't say that it's not organic chemistry. It's absolutely organic chemistry, but organic chemistry means carbon-based. Understand that. That's all it means. It doesn't mean free of pesticides. It doesn't mean free of synthetics. Like, it doesn't mean free of artificial flavors, it just means carbon-based. We are carbon-based. And so, you know, the well-meaning science out there says, well, we're carbon-based, and this compound is carbon-based, and there's carbon in petroleum, so we can take petroleum products and use the carbons and make carbon-based molecules for carbon-based people, right? And so it all fits together like, well, why not? But it is not food, and it is not in a form that we recognize as food, and we already covered that. We always cover it again. And so, and yet certain isolated synthetic compounds like that have gone through research and have been demonstrated to have a benefit. But all research is short term. You cannot have take this synthesized petroleum-based vitamin E product for the next 30 years, and then we'll follow you for 30 years after that. There is no study like that. But we can certainly go around the world and look at what people eat and what they've eaten in their culture for a long time, especially if they're real isolated cultures, and how that affects them at the end of age. So looking at senescence studies, aging studies, the blue zones, where people eat, what they eat, and they're not eating bottles of tablets of these synthetic nutrients. Ever.
It's a shame that they're not synthetics. So let me like bring up, for example, what you could find on our label versus what you would find in the alternative in the market. All right. So for example,
break down a label.
What's that?
Let's break down a label. Let's break it down.
Right. So let's do the first one that we were just talking about. This is vitamin C right here. Ours comes from an orange concentrate. Inside one tablet, you're getting 250 milligrams inside a 1 gram tablet. So that means that there's 25% vitamin C in that concentration. I challenge you to find any real food these days that has a 25% concentration of vitamin C in it. So what you're going to find on a label most often, if not all the time, is the term ascorbic acid, which we had already just covered right there. My understanding of ascorbic acid is it's made from hydrogenated sugars, which then gets processed with acetone, nail polish remover, basically. So as you were pointing out before, it may have began as paprika when Albert Svent Georgi discovered it, and as he broke it down and it lost its life and vitality. But then it hit to the market, and to synthetically produce that, the job got shipped over to China. That's where most of the ascorbic acid is coming from. And that ascorbic acid is now paprika free, food free. It's just made from a hydrogenated sugar being processed with acetone. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. So, okay. So now though, in the market, you can find camu vitamin C, amla vitamin C, acerola vitamin C. Those are rosehip vitamin C. Those are pretty common, but they're made like a almost like an herbal extract, and then standardized to vitamin C. I think you can get up to 50% standardization of vitamin C in, say, an amla extract. And so now, what is the difference of that versus something from the Grow Company, something in Grown by Nature? And I would posit, like an herbal extract, it's neat, it's great, it's like a tincture, you know. And herbal extracts have their purpose, but many of these things, to become usable in our industry, then have to be taken off of their proteins, their amino acids.
Yes.
Now what is that? It is now isolated from its compounds that are the keys to gain entry through the cells of the gut lining into the bloodstream and through the cell's membrane that it is trying to get access to help. So this is where, while there's stuff out there that's actually from food, actually from plants, clean extracts, do they have what they need to get in? And this is where I love those and I love to use them. But when somebody's having poor nutritional status, poor absorption, poor assimilation, I think we went over that a bit in the pilot, absorption, you know, and then assimilation, utilization by the cell, full bioavailability, they need something that can get past those cell membranes. And it has to have those biological molecules that give it that life force. And life force, okay, you know, maybe that's a woo-woo term to some people. Life force, prana, chi, agni. These terms are around because you're alive, your food is alive, but that stuff in that box called total is nowhere near alive, and your aliveness is borrowed to make that food, that like supplement or that processed food alive enough to not be toxic to you.
Wow. I like the way you put that.
So life force isn't like, we're not borrowing it from Star Wars, although I'm sure we're both fans, but you know, it's a real thing. That means that there is an alignment of energy, like kilocalories and joules that are necessary for your body to utilize something for energy, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And I think a lot of people are trying to lose weight. They think, oh, great, if this food makes me burn more calories than I get from eating it, that's great. But this is what ages us. Overeating, undernourishing. That's what ages us.
I think one of the, I often will talk about my perfect diet and how it starts. It's not always what I include, but it's just simply what to avoid. And if we can go back to our ancestral dieting when these things weren't even available, and if you just stick to something as simple as that, or you had talked about in the pilot, you know, the fermenting of corn as such, like it's just lost practices that is wreaking havoc on our diets, especially now here in the US with all the GMO corn that people are probably eating, on top of the fact that it's non-fermented or the dairy even. It just paints such a need for people to first, when they quote read the label, that they're going to be understanding what it is to avoid. There's just so many marketing tactics out there, as you're pointing out, for example, the vitamin C, and how it needs those cofactors in which you're referring to, and how vitamin C, it has amino acids. I actually have a printout here that when I do post this segment, I'm going to be posting this in the comments like as a PDF. But for example, with our vitamin C, which is coming in a concentrated orange, not an extract, there's a huge difference between an extract versus a concentrate. Concentrate just means that the water was removed, where an extract means something was taken out of something, and therefore it's leaving behind something. It's leaving behind cofactors. When you see ascorbic acid marketed, usually you'll see the words pure ascorbic acid. It's so pure because it's so isolated that it doesn't have any other cofactors along with it. With our vitamin C, you get 14 amino acids that are all linked in there. You have alanine, arginine, aspartic acid, glutamic acid, glycine, histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, I don't even know how to pronounce that one, but serine, tyrosine, valine. These are just all, and these are found within all of Grown by Nature's renatured nutrients that we use, an amino acid profile for each specific nutrient out there. If you go into the vitamin shop, or you go into GNC, you go anywhere, you look on the shelves, or even the most exclusive health food store down the shop that is in Beverly Hills, whatever, people think that, oh, if you're paying more, you're going to get a better quality product. You can find the same ascorbic acid in a dollar shop as you can in the health food shops that are in Belterre, for example. There's not going to be a single cofactor. You're not going to have any of those amino acids. And the importance of those amino acids, first and foremost, I believe our audience should understand, is what those amino acids do when collectively combined, branched chain amino acids, they become those proteins. And these protein structures are what are responsible for the delivery of the nutrients. So upon our digestion, these proteins are actively transporting, like a taxi driver or a limo driver, these nutrients to the site of destination within our body. There's a sort of communication that goes on from our brain, from the gut. Oh, we have some calcium that arrived. We have some vitamin C. Oh, and this has all the proper protein. Nothing else needs to get done with this. Ready to go, ready to ship to the area of need within the body. So there's that communication. Without that branched chain amino acid profile accompanying that nutrient, you're getting a lifeless chemical. You're getting something that your body doesn't recognize. Our bodies are not fooled the same way we are when we're shopping in a health food supplement market.
Absolutely not. And those glycoproteins, glycolipids, these are, if you have a fat soluble, you want to see that it's bound to some lipids as well. This is what I always loved about the Grow company D3. Like, that's amazing, because it's the normal D3 starting material that anybody would sell, but then, chelated in such a way to be accepted into the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, or accepted into the Lactobacillus bulgaricus, and then complexed there with what it would normally be complexed with, which in cod liver or deer liver or your liver would be a lipid. And so I've always talked about the Grow vitamin D as microscopically liposomal. Inside a microscopic organism, it's microscopically bound to little fat complexes. And it might look like a dry powder or a pressed tablet when you get it, but inside of that, it's already linked up the way that it would be if you would just go catch a Alaskan cod and eat that cod liver, the way that it would be if you were hunting in a pristine environment and ate that animal liver, which most of us don't do that or wouldn't, even if we could. It's the way that it is in your liver when you go out in the sun, like you should be able to, and you have good cholesterol, which is a fat transporting protein in your skin, and can convert that sun to vitamin D. Aren't you a miracle? You can go in the sun and make your own vitamin D. Isn't that amazing?
Incredible.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is.
Our plants can take the sun and the air, CO2, the waste of us and other animals, and turn it into matter, carbohydrates, right? And so that's how a plant grows. You talked about NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus being the three fertilizers that fed the Green Revolution, that made all the yield go up of all of our agriculture, but didn't put back the other elements. Nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus are each their own element. They don't come with selenium. They don't come with boron. They don't come with iodine. They don't come with calcium. They don't come with magnesium. So the plant takes up all what's available, and then it's no longer there. So why is our soil depleted of these things? Because the Green Revolution used them up, and somehow we didn't get that you got to put them back. Those elements don't come out of thin air. They have to be in the soil and in the water.
And also, if you don't mind me cutting in real quick, because I think is an important part of the whole story of how these nutrients are, why they're necessary. Because you'll have people saying, "Oh, well, I tested my soil and it's rich in nutrients." The problem is, as it's been my understanding is that due to acid rain, due to environmental toxins that are coming down from the sky, raining down in the form of geoengineering, whatever it is, it's killing the life activity within the soil. So even,
Microbiological activity.
yeah, and it's killing that microbiological activity, these millions and trillions of microorganisms which break down our rocks and feed them to the roots of these plants, allow those nutrients to then be fed up through the root system into the budding tomato or the budding apple, pear, whatever it is that is growing, you know, for these purposes of these nutrients. It's through the root system, but because of the acid rain, because of such an environmental
When we say
letdown.
glyphosate,
Yeah,
antibiotic.
I was just on a communication about that today. People were sharing, you know, how many glyphosates are found in your General Mills, your Cheerios, or your Wheaties and stuff. It was like a side-by-side comparison, but glyphosates are leaching into everything. They're found even in or non-organic cottons, such as used with tampons and stuff like that. Women need to be understanding that they're not using even organic feminine products, that they're putting themselves at risk by exposing themselves to this glyphosate. It's absolutely killing what it's doing for our foods and what it's doing for our bodies and the products that people are using it.
Absolutely. I'm glad you touched on that, because there are things in our dirt that need to be there for any mineral to be used. And a great example. So I live on a ranch now. We have 25 acres. We got here, it was neglected. We tested the soil, like what's missing, what's not there. And now we got a company to bring in a blend of earth elements that needed to go on the soil. We were good on calcium, or no, good on magnesium, low on calcium, low on selenium, sulfur, copper. I think our boron was okay, which is great. So then they cast these industrial minerals, just like you would find in your brand name pharmaceutical, you know, like drugstore cheap vitamin, right? They put them out on the field. Do we just water and then it just goes into the plant? No, it'll just sit there as a little nugget on the soil or in the soil, unless we activate the soil with microorganisms. What do we use? Soil-based organisms, compost, fish emulsion, organic sugar. You know, got to make a little baking show for the microorganisms that we're putting out there. Get them activated, send the animals out, let them urinate, defecate, stomp, you know, attract the bugs, the insects. It's a whole dance, right? And this is what Albert Svient-Georgi understood. This is what Andy Soleil understood. This is what you and I understand. This is our gut lining. My pasture, my gut lining, same thing. Got to have those humic and fulvic acid components that we find in dirt that gets in our plants that are grown in that dirt. Got to have the microbiological components, got to have the minerals and elements have to be there. But if you don't have a healthy microbiome, not going to happen. So let me ask all of you, how many of you have a perfectly healthy, balanced microbiome? No digestive distress, glowing skin, healthy tongue, great eyesight all the time. How many of you have that? If not, you do not have a healthy, balanced microbiome. And if you're taking industrial, chemical, synthetic vitamins and minerals, you can't use them. Just like my soil couldn't use that mineral cast until it got made alive again.
Well, good for you.
So what does Grow Company do? Grow Company says, I'm going to put it in the microbe and then I'm going to give it to you, because I'm betting your microbiome isn't sufficient to do this itself.
That's an incredible way to put it there. Yeah, through the pilot, as I was going back, you had referenced the way the Grow Company uses microbiological farming and how that becomes a part of your microbiome and that whole process. So I'm fascinated by that whole concept of this is a micro farming. It's that was the first time I heard that sort of concept. So I appreciate you sharing that, because that sort of broadens even my own horizons in dealing with these nutrients for 20 years, that this is a form of microbiological farming. It's incredible how he was ahead of his time. And And we're still even trying to catch up to that understanding. And through a show like this, I'm hoping that we can convey that message out there, how important it is to have nutrients that are delivered in the proper food structured form that went through the process of microbiological farming.
Yeah. And farming is growing something.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's products out there now that are fermented, which is great. It's much better than the alternative. It's great to take a vitamin or a mineral or a combination, put it in a fermentation, give it some sugar, give it some protein, and let that thing happen. That is a breaking down and a complexing. Grow company is a building.
Yes.
And a making more complicated, more intricate, more complex, right? And so this is the difference. Can you and I be pressed to the wall and say which one is better? Well, fermenting is what we do to try to make our food more digestible and more assimilable. Growing it, farming through a microorganism is what we do to make the food alive again. And you're borrowing that microbiome because yours isn't good enough to do it. And any microbe that eats a good nutrient and takes it in makes what's called a postbiotic. So the microbe is the probiotic. The postbiotic is what it makes. The prebiotic is what it eats. So Grow Company makes the prebiotic, the growth medium, and the nutrient, right?
Yeah.
The probiotic is the Lactobulgaricus or the Saccharomyces cerevisiae. The postbiotic is the newly complexed nutrient and all the other microbiological cofactors, which not only give you that nutrient, but now there's this postbiotic soup that is going to enhance the life and the activity and the capacity of your own microorganisms and give them a leg up in their growth and their function.
I really appreciate how you're talking about the differences between the fermentation, which is a dying off process basically, or an over maturing. It's not to be exactly equated with the Grow Company as you're talking, because I've heard it best described as it's a budding or farming or a growth procedure. So as soon as they know that the cells have been fully satisfied, and let me explain that real quick. This microorganism that they're using to grow these nutrients into, it is a form of yeast, or it's a form of the probiotic form, which is a beneficial culture for your stomach as well. But it has the ability to, it has active receptor sites. That's the term. So it's basically like a hotel with all these rooms for rent. So whatever is being fed into it is then incorporated within the structure. And that was actually ruled within a court case hearing, saying that grow nutrients are not a simple mixture of food and a chemical powder, but they've undergone a physiochemical change, that they are a complete whole food structure. So that's why you're seeing a 25% concentration. Basically, these nutrients are ancestral dieting, the way our foods used to be, growing to their full capacity, free of any environmental toxins that are harboring or harming that growth procedure. So these nutrients are grown in such a way that they fill that plant cell to a full capacity. And as soon as they get to that point, which they're analyzing with infrared spectrometers, it's like an amazing scientific process just to evaluate. There's no artificial manipulation in the process, but they're examining it through amazing abilities to say, okay, it's done its growth procedure. And at that point is when they immediately flash freeze or freeze dry that powder, which then becomes an inert substance. So it's sort of like, what's that?
Cryosleep.
Exactly. So it's sort of like the stored energy of a nut or a seed, where it becomes activated upon the digestion. So it's not something that, for example, you hear about fermented cod liver oil pills. A lot of those are turning rancid from the moment they're getting packaged. And as they transfer or heat or whatever, they start becoming rancid actually within those capsules. But because of the absolute perfection of timing of when they freeze dry this, it sort of holds that into a place so it becomes a dormant. That was the word I was searching for. It's a dormant type of energy. So it only comes reactivated upon our digestion and as our body breaks it.
Warmth, moisture, pH.
Yeah. And it's simple reasons why and how it was done and manufactured in such a way that they've tested our nutrients for the duration of humidity. They put it in like extreme humidity up to like 18 months, and it did not affect the bioavailability whatsoever. They tested these nutrients. And when you see a commercial chemical sourced vitamin, usually it'll say, keep out of the heat, store in a cool, dry place. It doesn't really make sense. Where are these nutrients usually growing in nature? Out in the hot sun, the leaves, and out in the heat.
Right,
So
what keeps it stable?
yep. So these nutrients have actually been tested up to 140 degrees for a duration of 18 months, and it does not affect their bioavailability whatsoever within that period. So there's such a stable, but yet a dormant doesn't mean that it's dead, but it's going to come back to life upon digestion. So there is an energy that is within these nutrients. There is living energy. There is protein structures that are actively going to be transporting these nutrients. So that's my little commercial for what the differences are here. But
So why yeast and bacteria? Why not just one or the other?
I think they were able to discover, I believe yeast definitely was one that they did first, but then when they went to the biogurt section or the probiotic yogurt portion, they found that they were actually able to get a little bit of a higher concentration with some minerals. And they also understand that the market might start to say, oh, yeast is something I was told to stay away from. So then they went with this other alternative option. But let me first address that yeast factor. In the 30, almost 40 some odd years now, that the grow company has been in operation, they've never had a contraindicated reported for their yeast products. My mentor, Dr. Llewellyn, has done work with people that have severe reactions to yeast. They can't even breathe the outside air. He said they're kept in like double pressure treated wards, but they feed them these yeast nutrients and they do extremely well. Why? Because in the growth procedure, you're not left with the active yeast cell anymore, because the cell walls have been
Sliced open.
enzymes removed, enzymatically removed, and now you're left with, as you were describing it before, a soupy broth. So the cell walls were removed. Anytime there's ever been an allergen associated with yeast, it's been found in the cell walls of that yeast. So after they've done their growth procedure and they analyze it, they make sure there's no cell walls left over. And then once that becomes made known, and then that batch gets put into the tablets, into the capsules. So now they understand that, okay, this is exactly the way we want it. There's no known allergens associated with any of the renatured nutrients. They've done in such an amazing way to make sure that the purity is maintained, but you're still going to have people that are going to just be told, by all means, stay away from any yeast products. So I believe that's why they opened up the other alternative, but they can be used interchangeably.
And there are very few supplement brands even using these. And in the US, there used to be a few, and I don't know if we want to name names, but there's some of the big brands that do fermenting and culturing started with grow, let it go, started with grow, let it go, started with grow, mixed it up with other things. So, I came to you because I was like, this is the only brand still using all the original grow nutrients, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the classic case of bait and switch. People start with one thing, they build a following on that, and then they switch it out and they're like, no, it's still great. I'm sure it's still great, but grow is what grow is. And it has, I'm all for technology improving. I'm all for things getting better, but this concept, as you said, Andy Soleil was ahead of his time. The passion was there. We can't forget what this does for us. And yeah, I would love to just go out and eat my food and get what I need. but I can't. And I would love to just go grind up some organic produce and say, look, now I have everything I need. But actually, I've come across more people who have reactions to phytonutrient compounds, potent polyphenols, because their microbiome is not intact and not balanced. And if it's not, the information is too intense and the body just views it as like an overload. And so always, as long as I've been, recommending supplement brands that have the grow nutrients in them to people, I've said for your most sensitive, for the people with the most gut issues, for the people working on their gut, so people with candida, people with stuff where their microbiome is all out of whack. And that person might say, oh, I have a yeast allergy. What does it mean to have a yeast allergy? It means you're cross-reacting to something you were exposed to. Maybe you were exposed to black mold. Maybe you're exposed to lifeless food like leftovers that sits in the fridge for too long. Maybe you were exposed to antibiotics and you developed an imbalance of yeast in your gut, and now you're developing a sensitivity to your own imbalance. But that doesn't mean, like you said, you can't walk outside without breathing in a fungus, and you can't live on this planet without there being a fungus, and yeast is a fungus. It's one of the most common fungus among us, right? So sorry, had to do that. But anyway, your point, and I want to bring you back to this because a lot of people don't know this. So like, where can I find these grow nutrients? Correct me if I'm wrong, but Grown by Nature is the only one using them exclusively. There may be a few here and there. Where are they in the world? They're where you said: medical wards, extremely ill patients, tube feeding, and sadly, in hospital systems that are a little bit more enlightened than the one that we live in here, right? So expound on that a little, because I think it's really important. Like, this is something that's made for people who are really poorly assimilating nutrients and are in a hospital. But many people are poorly assimilating nutrients and walking around.
No, and that honestly is a mission I took on, in knowing that I would be one of the only companies out there doing this. This truth needs to get out there. I had also learned that there were other companies, some companies that had licenses, but they forfeited their rights because they started adding in things they weren't supposed to. They lost their rights to sell these grow nutrients. There's other companies that, for whatever reason, they felt they can do it by themselves in a cheaper way. For example, you were saying, oh, I don't know if we want to mention names. I'll mention names. Mega Food, for example. They were actually one of the first licensees of the Grow Company, and they put out a line in '93. And I actually found actual evidence of their ads where they say Mega Food is a licensee of the Grow Company.
Remember that.
So they had that information published and available. But then what happened? Now Mega Food is still one of the biggest, quote, competitors against mine, but I'll put the quality of our nutrients against theirs any day because they're not using Grow Company materials anymore. They're labeling on their labels that they have over 400% of vitamin C, which, as I was pointing out before, you can only get like 25% per gram, let's say, in the highest concentration that we're offering, but they're offering such a high milligram amount. And then it was discovered that they're adding in synthetic ascorbic acid in there. I don't know if it was fully disclosed or not, but that information did become available. And I've had many customers saying, I had tried Mega Food for years and it wasn't helping. And yours, not to just say I'm the only company that's out there, but I am the only company out there that I know of
doing it purely
within the United States. I know there's other companies throughout the world that have obtained the licenses, and through my original licensee, he set up other companies in the UK and stuff like that. But to my understanding, no. I take it as a mission because I know that the importance of this mission out there. If it dies with my tongue, then I was scared for how this message would affect the world. But then someone like you come along and share with me that you're also familiar with these nutrients. So I was like, okay, now we got a team of two. Let's get back out there. It gave me the rejuvenation that I needed to get.
Now we're a team.
Well, I appreciate it.
At least two to be a team.
Yes, because it's a daunting walk by yourself when you feel like I can't do this all by myself, but I've tried and I've done as best I can. I've, been able to get on radio shows, and for people that are really understanding and want to put this message out there. And that's what we are doing this show for, is because we believe the audience should be made aware of this. And if it gets under your skin as much as it does for Amber and I, we know that you're going to be sharing this message, and this message will get out there and ultimately get this world back into a truthful state. Because if you're going to make the decision to buy the cheaper stuff, but you were fully aware of what it was doing for your body and you understood the ramifications of what that meant, you had that decision. But when we're making these decisions, pardon my expression of ignorance, but it literally is an ignorance, not due to any fault of the consumer, but because there is so much
An
misinformation.
innocent ignorance. Yeah.
And
It's absolutely true. And this grow company nutrient trends, I've been trying to explain it to people for 9 years. So it is challenging to explain. It's complicated when you view it from a scientific perspective. Like you said, there's all this equipment, all this analytical equipment. There's like timers, there's temperatures, there's like everything has to be right. pH, the temperature, the time. It's complicated to turn something back into a living complex. Hello, that's life. It's complicated. You can't just go, woo, I'm going to make that alive, right? But the easiest way for me to explain grow nutrients versus everything else is it is farming microbiologically and creating complex structures. Everything else is reductionist. And this is what we've gotten used to today. Okay. A pharmacological compound is a reduction of something that is out there in nature or in your body. And it is the most reduced to be the smallest, to be the easiest to produce, to be the cheapest to produce, to just get right sharp into your body. That's going to have the most side effects, always. And also pharmaceutical compounds come in mirror images. And this one works and this one makes the side effects. And you can't separate them. So natural compounds available out in our food and in our environment and within us and within the animals that we might eat or the plants that we might eat, they have a host of different companions along with them. Even when we take an herb, which I'm very into finding herbs on my land right now and figuring what to do with them, but I struggle with putting it in a distilled alcohol. It's done, and it's been done for a long time, but even putting that herb not in a hot water tea, but not in a honey, not in an apple cider vinegar, but into a vodka is now going to create a certain reduction. More so if I were to then evaporate certain things off and, like you said, concentrate or even separate out certain compounds, right? You get into CO2, you get, as a solvent, and you're going to separate out certain compounds. And so this is really what the industry is built on, and there's a place for that. But if you're really trying to get nutrients that are food-like and should be in your food and are replacing what is missing from your food, then you don't want a reductionist product. You want a fully complex, complicated ingredient that your body sees as food. And microbes do it out in the soil for the plants that we eat, and they do it in us. And so grown by nature with grow nutrients in it, the grow nutrients literally it's the simplest company name, growing it.
Yeah.
We can't farm it. That's not a controlled environment, and it takes months when you can do it in hours in a tank of microorganisms getting the right ingredients. It's genius.
Absolutely is. It's mind-boggling to try to explain. You're right. It's such a scientific process of how they came across this and how they're analyzing it. But the simple message is that it's food. This issue wouldn't happen we wouldn't even have to talk about supplements if we didn't mess up the state of our food. We wouldn't have to have looked for different types of fertilizers had we done it appropriately and stopped dropping the acid rain down upon our fields. Like, there's all this stuff that just really got bypassed in the way that we have come across the way we look at food and the way we need to generate higher yields, and just we're playing the creator with the creator's food, and we're trying to mess with it. We're trying to improve upon it. I heard it often said by my mentor. I always go back to some of these taglines he has, but he said, man and scientists, they can break down an apple and they can tell you every single component within that apple. They can tell you every molecule within that apple, but I've never met a scientist that can then take those molecules, put them back together and make an apple. There's something that we pointed out within the structure of the way these foods are naturally packaged. And that's why Andy Soleil went to painstaking details to make sure he didn't kill off the yeast. He didn't add the sodium selenite and immediately that toxic earth metal by itself would be killing off the yeast, but he found a way to actively feed it so that yeast can then just take the selenium and leave the byproduct that is unnecessary. And then he had a selenium enriched yeast. And that one product alone can just turn so many different immune systems back, recovery, because it's, and as another one of his sayings, it was like, it plugs the holes of your nutritional immune system. So if I handed you a bowl of water, Amber, to walk across the desert, but there was a hole at the bottom of that bowl, you wouldn't be able to get so many steps before that water would empty. But plugging those nutritional holes within our immune system with the nutrients that your body needs, that is not found in our foods naturally, but when you can incorporate it in a safe way for your body to recognize, such with these grow company nutrients through Grown by Nature, you get a response that your body craves. We're just basically giving back to our bodies what they need and what is missing in our foods these days. And it's such a simple message out there, but yes, it's a struggle to try to really wrap around how it's produced and why. The consumer doesn't need to know why it's produced, but the consumer will ask, what's the results of it? And the grow company, as you said before, I didn't start my company and then decide to try to mimic or fake studies or talk about studies that were performed on food and bring it back to where my nutrients are that I'm trying to sell. I began the company knowing that there's already this clinical evidence out there, that there is peer-reviewed studies demonstrating time and time again that these nutrients are not only better absorbed, but they're longer retained, more effectively utilized within the body, or higher, more bioavailable. There was a company that tried to actually take the grow company down by saying they were making unsubstantiated claims. So this is another form over here that I can upload when I come to this segment, but it talks about that on February 8th, 1993, there was a $3 million lawsuit that came to end when a California district judge made his ruling on all the evidence presented to him. They had FDA scientists, they had infrared spectrometers, nuclear magnetic resonance testing to analyze what the differences were between these food nutrients versus other competitors. And they were now allowed, and Grown by Nature can also use these claims with our nutrients. Renatured materials manufactured under a proprietary process. Renatured nutrients have undergone a physiochemical change and are not simply a mixture. Renatured nutrients are better absorbed, retained, and utilized than the USP BP comparable nutrient. So
That's awesome.
This is allowable claims.
93 people, 1993.
Since 1993, that was being made available.
That's 30 years of like sleight of hand of the supplement industry, just negating something that was determined.
Yep. So that was 93. And then just 6 years later, the man won the Nobel Prize, as I was talking about in that pilot show later, Gunther Blobel, for discovering that these proteins have intrinsic signals that govern their transport and localization within the cell. So that basically means that these proteins that we were talking about before, they're the taxi drivers that deliver these nutrients. So when I know that as I was reading off before, the vitamin C and the amount of amino acids within there, I know that they have that protein structure. Apologize about that. I got my guard dog over here watching the fortress here, but so those nutrients have undergone a physiochemical change that have brought them to a point where they are with the proper branched chain amino acids. They have the full amino acid profile, things that you're not going to find in the pharmaceutical pure chemical.
Yep. And some of the common missing things from soil at various places around the world, but in the US, let's just say selenium, iodine, boron. And these are things that you've made very certain to include in the Grown by Nature products.
Yes.
Which is phenomenal. It's not in your soil, and it's not being adjusted in most farming.
Now let's talk about, for example, iodine, because that is one of the ones that, how many people you hear they have thyroid issues and that they're being told, oh, you need to get on an iodine supplement. So what are those people taking? They're taking potassium iodide, which is, let me see if I can figure.
Or even Lugol's, liquid iodide.
It's used to make the potassium iodine is used to make photographic emulsion and used as an expectorant. That's what it's pharmaceutically listed as. It doesn't say anything about being a supplement for your health. It's a synthetic process. But when we offer our iodine, for example, one of our products is a selenium iodine B12 combination. I'm getting a lot of great reviews back from that, from people that I can't take any other form of iodine. This one is adjusting with my body and is really helping out. So it's.
Yeah. And where would we have found that? Why are we not finding that in our dairy cows? Why is there no iodine in their milk? Why is there no selenium? Again, what's in their grass? Are they even on grass? What's in the soil the grass is growing on? Grass will grow, as we talked about, with enough magnesium to make it green, to have the chlorophyll and work in the chloroplast to make more carbon structure. It'll grow. But that doesn't mean that it will have these nutrients in it. So then the cow won't have those nutrients in it. So the milk won't have those nutrients in it. And then you have to add them back, or they're just not there. Now, if you were in the Swiss Alps, and those cows are out grazing with their little bell on, they're going to still be picking that up. If you're in Bulgaria, if you're in Croatia, if my neighbor down here, Mary, and her goats are out grazing and we get raw goat milk from her, and that has this in it. But if our soil's depleted, we better put it back in there, because it otherwise won't be in that goat milk. It won't be in the food I'm getting from my garden. It won't be in the eggs from my chickens, because it's not in what they're eating.
But the label will say it's in there because they're adding it back in there. The term fortification, to me, is one of the biggest marketing buzzwords. Fortified. What does that mean? They're adding something in that wasn't naturally occurring at the time of boxing it or putting it into the carton for the milk. So why do you see milk, almost every single milk says fortified with vitamins A and D? You're talking about the brilliance of Grow Company's vitamin D3 before. But if you look at what the synthetic alternative is, it's listed as cholecalciferol. It's coming from irradiated animal fat, such as cattle brains, spinal cords, or it gets solvently extracted or pressed from lanolin, which is pressed wool grease.
Sheep sebum.
What is that?
Sheep sebum. It's every time I go to grab one of my sheep, it's just, they're slippery and oily, and that's what the lanolin is,
Well, that's how you get your vitamin D then. So you just press a bunch of that.
I just rub up against the sheep.
So
the snuggle sheep.
I envy the fact that you have a sheep farm. That's insane. I love that. When you were sharing that with me before, and all the foods that you guys have on your organic pastured farms and stuff like that. Good for you. You're living the dream out there.
Yep, it's all about what we can eat, but it gave me this insight into what grow nutrients are relative to farming and ranching. And it's making those things available to people that aren't farming and ranching, that aren't growing their stuff in their garden, that don't have an animal eating healthy food that they then get animal products from. You know, the A and the D fortifying the calcium, because that's what makes proteins usable by the body. And it came with our proteins when we ate the whole animal, or the animal produced a product, an egg or milk that was healthy because they were still grazing on the grass. As soon as you put corn or even excessive grains, and certainly palm kernels, because I've never seen a cow in a palm tree, as soon as you put these things into their gut, their microbiome just goes as wonky as if you're eating gummy bears all day. And their microbes turn into a desert. They only get pathogens and a few other ones. And now what is going to be in their byproduct? The fat, the protein, the milk, it's chickens, the eggs, is going to be deficient. And this is why it has to be refortified with, or it got cooked out in pasteurization. The A and the D got cooked out. You know, that's another reason.
Yeah.
Why do we have to fortify our Wheaties with B vitamins? Because they got processed out. Why is flour enriched and fortified? And then why were you told that this is the same thing as food when it's just a chemical spray on your cereal?
Yeah.
So don't be fooled. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make common sense, right? Just sit and think about it. You walk outside, you go to a garden, you go to an orchard, you go to a ranch. That's food. How can it be food when it's like got a pressed shape and it's in a box and it has all this marketing? It's got Tony the Tiger on it or whatever. How is that food? That's not how it grew.
Tony the Tiger. I like that. That brings
Remember
me
that?
back to my old school. They're great days.
Great.
What time we got? If you don't mind, I'm gonna just.
2:19.
Do we go over?
2:19 my time. We went a little over.
Okay, yeah, because
We started a little late.
I don't have any clock ahead of me or something like that. So,
Okay.
do you have to get going?
I'm okay.
All right, so maybe we'll just finish up like a wrap.
Yeah.
Let me
Correct.
see. And what you got? You got some freestyles over there?
No, not me.
All right, so
My kids don't allow me to do that.
So I'm just going to talk real quick about, I guess in summary, yeah, let's just like close it out in summary about what
Yep.
we talked about or something like that. So, all right. All right. So go ahead.
Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Look around you. What is real food, right? Make sure when you supplement, because your real food is deficient in certain nutrients, make sure your supplement is as real as the food that you would and should be eating. That's as simple as it is, right? And there are products out there that are exactly what your gut turns these nutrients into, exactly what the plants in the field and in your garden turns these nutrients into. You can access that in a supplement. And so why would you not want to? That's just kind of where I'm at with it.
No, and I, again, will say that I am biased in the way that I would say that I totally agree with you. And I know, in fact, that grown by nature and the way that when we were talking about the term read the label, for example, maybe we'll cover this product alone just next time talking about the B vitamins, because this is talking about when you read the label, what are you going to find on here? On ours, you're going to see alfalfa concentrate for your folate. You're going to find citrus concentrate for the vitamin C that was added in here. You're going to find all whole food ingredients. But when you're looking at any form of USP supplement out there, you're going to find coal tar derivatives. For example, B6, pyridoxine hydrochloride is a petroleum ester which gets processed with formaldehyde. Or if you look
You're
at
welcome.
B12, cyanocobalamin, you're going to be having another coal tar derivative which is being processed with cyanide. So when you start looking at where these other ingredients and how they're sourced, and they're not even coming from any food structure, but they're synthetically produced or they're synthetically altered from just ground minerals, it brings up the point that we are what we eat. And again, as I started out to show, but it's more importantly how we think, so we make the appropriate decisions upon what we're eating, what we're digesting, what we're allowing into our bodies. I mean, that's simply, dieting should be really considered. What do we allow into our bodies? Put up that fortress of saying, no, read the label. And I'm confident you'll come back and you'll be contacting us when you really truly understand what the differences are, when there's 99.9% of the brands in the market are all selling identical pharmaceutical grade chemicals. But here we are with Grown by Nature, and here I am about to celebrate 18 years here in the United States.
Still kicking.
Still kicking, still putting that message out there. But I definitely want to thank you, Amber, for your involvement, contacting me, because you've given me a rejuvenation to really, let's get this message out there and let's get this platform out there. Let's get people truly understanding what the differences are out there and what we're going to truly allow, not only for our bodies, but our families as well. Thank you very
I'm
much.
so excited to just go deeper on this than I ever got to before, and so I really appreciate the collab.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And until next time, please do like, subscribe, share this message out there, because if you're watching this message and then you click on to the next one, you're probably going to see some cute little cat photos or something like that. But this message shouldn't stop with you after you hear this. Please share this message out there. Thank you very much. God bless. Thank you, Amber.